So we're standing now on the other side of the gallery opposite where we were just discussing the larger works. And the pan showed a selection of the 48 by 48 inch wall sculptures. And what was noteworthy, there was one at the end that was very linear. It was a stack, and it was sort of a continuation of the other side, and then it joined in because it was a river, another river, and the palette, clearly very earth colors, then started flowing into these other works. So it was sort of a bridge going that direction to the other half of the show. But these are all, as you were saying, they're sort of more Innerhole. They're more circular, but they are broken, they're open.
Right.
But there's also another element you might want to talk about. This one is particularly interesting because it's a different sort of bisection or cut or look, a stratification of the earth versus sort of a topographical or landscape view.
Right.
But yeah, these are distinctly different. Not distinctly different. I mean, they're all drawn out they come out of the drawings and what have you, but in the meditative process. But why don't you talk about how you see them in a contrast, to the other half of the show?
Yeah. Yeah, when I was selecting them, I guess I was attracted in these to the large flat colors. I've always worked with Formica. The Innerhole show was all surfaced in Formica, so I wanted to use that material with these large flat areas of color. I was trying to find ways to work with those where there'd be sections of them that were drawn in, but it really seemed to be either there was drawing or there was no drawing. There was not. I couldn't find a great hybrid look to make it work. So
you had contemplated possibly then drawing on
yeah, and
these.
I looked at ways of drawing on top of the Formica with materials, but also not that satisfying. The surface that we get with the primer and the sanding is a much more satisfying surface, and it takes the materials much better. But I always like the Formica because of the different textures that are possible, and because of the sort of evenness and flatness. When you see a computer-generated diagram of the Earth, a map or a cross-section, like you're saying, it's in these flat colors, in these section colors, or posterized colors. So it's kind of attractive. And the colors are really consistent, and they're really stay with the brightness. Yeah, and the Formica gives you a variety of textures. So that was a kind of a material choice. I guess trying to play that absolute regularity versus these with the hand gesture, and looking for some play there. They come out of the computer and then they're carved in that material. There's kind of irregularity in the material, and then trying to fit this form of the Formica over it is an interesting challenge. And it sometimes twists it in different ways and gives different kind of reflections off of it. So it's just different, I think different material exploration. And I don't know what the drawings, there's a variety. When I choose, it's a variety. So I try to see, there's some where I'm working with gouaches really directly on the paper, and I'm doing these washes, these bright color washes, and then there's others where there's not any color in the drawing at all. So actually these ones that are these two white ones came from just graphite drawings, and then I added the color when I came back in. On the pieces, I decided to add it as color pastel instead. So yeah, a lot of the differences are involved in choices about working with materials.
But vis-a-vis the selections from 2010, this one's a good example because there is a lot of complexity and detail in these, even though they are, as you say, the sort of flat surfaces and what have you. There's wood grain. There's sort of something because you're looking at this as like coming into the core of the earth. Yeah. That's sort of more sort of like mica and and it's sort of more elemental.
Crystalline structure.
But they also differ quite tremendously from 2010 in that there's so much spatial depth.
Yeah, well, in 2010, I wasn't carving in thick material. I only used 3/4 inch, So, and I only did what they call pocket cuts. So I was doing no 3D carving. It was just coming down and clearing out, coming down and clearing out. So at best I could get a 1/4 and a 1/2 inch and then full. So I had only really choice of like 2 or 3 depths to get any noticeable.
So these were consciously done this way to get more
Yeah, so there's a
depth.
2-inch, the material's 2 inches thick, and also in a lot of them, and on the sides of this and some of the bigger pieces, there's real 3D carving. So it's going over it, and the bit is moving up and down in smooth
Yes.
ways. So you get, the material is thicker, so you get more relief, and the technique is a 3D carving as opposed to 2D pocket cuts. So yeah, they're more practice and sophistication with the CNC router itself, and learning how to set up tool paths and do that kind of work. And the edges are smooth. There's a lot more refinement in the technique.
But and the other thing too about these that I think is noteworthy, and it's a statement you had made of, I'm not going to get it right. It's something in terms of so above and below. So
Yeah.
because that's sort of
you're talking about the yeah. So one of the teachings is that what you find in your true nature, when you discover your true nature, is the universe, is the same as the true nature of the universe. So when in Innerhole, it was a closed thing and it was a closed introspection, and the discovery was this kind of this infinity inside myself, this kind of complete openness, this whole of infinity inside myself. And in this show, one of the changes, one of the growths of that is that not only is it enclosed there, compressed in the center, but when it breaks like that, you can see it's the same.
Yeah, and then this break
so
here.
The wall is the same. The wall doesn't change. The thing that's behind everything is also what's behind, my true nature.
And this is a good example then.
Yeah.
How did you state that? I can't remember. I don't have the wording exactly.
As above, so below?
Yeah, as above, so below. And it was very...
Or the microcosm, macrocosm kind of thing.
Got it.
There's a similarity in what's
But
the
that
very
is a
tiniest
consistency between the two bodies of work.
Yeah.
The difference is, though, is you have created these sort of breaks and
Yeah.
fissures. Some are more pronounced and profound than others. Clearly, on the other side, where they almost... Some of them
segments.
very segmented or bordered on sort
Yeah.
of linear paths.
Yeah.
So, but again, everything comes out of the drawings. It all comes out of the meditative process. It all shows this sort of evolution of how you've been developing your own practice and process. Even though these resemble the 2010 works, they're quite fundamentally different in the ways we just discussed. And they're part of this ongoing evolution towards these more broken, fragmented, and linear pieces.
We don't know. We don't know where it's going.
Yeah, we don't know where it's going. This is where it stopped right now. But
That's where it is right now, and then next week, we'll just see what comes up in the drawings, and in a few years we'll make some bigger ones and see where it's gotten to.
But the other connection between these two is this piece, which is the software artwork,
right?
And which is also comes out of drawing practice, albeit digital. But why don't you talk about that? Because it's sort of what bridges these two in this show, but also conceptually, correct?
Yeah, well, as you know, when you asked me to do the show, I originally thought I would have a certain number of wall pieces, and I would try to produce a piece of software. I always sort of saw it over here somewhere on a screen, to write software is to be a very deliberate thing, and you can see how that has gone against the improvisational drawing. So the methodology I was having a problem with, because I've gotten over the years further and further away from this very deliberate assignment of meaning into the work. But in software, you got to know what you're doing. You can't just write anything.
It can't be willy-nilly.
It doesn't run. You have to really kind of have a bigger plan. So I was in conflict, and I've been in conflict with that for a while. And I haven't had a great resolution of it. But this is 2020, and in 2000 I published a piece called Complex City. So I thought, wouldn't it be grand if I could do a new Complex City 20 years update? But as I got into it and I started doing it, either it was completely derivative of the original Complex City,
right,
just taking like the fancy parts.
And you don't like doing that.
It wasn't coming out. Yeah, it was just imposing it. Yeah, I don't like to do that. And I wanted to make new discovery. And then I'd moved out of the city, so it was really hard to write about the city.
Yeah.
I couldn't authentically write about the city, so I tried the highways. Anyway, it just had a lot of conflict, nailing down meaning and getting it to work. And so as the show approached last spring, I really thought, I'm just not going to have a software piece. I'm just going to go with the wall pieces and see how they work. And then COVID and the pandemic and the lockdown happened, and it just sort of happened at the time. And the timing was that I'd basically gotten the work all ready for the show. We were going to ship within weeks. We were already talking about shipping dates for the work. You'd come up and seen it, and we knew it was going to happen. It was sometime in March. We knew we were going to ship in early April. We were going to install, and everything stopped. The businesses were closed.
Yeah.
No one could go out. But then the work was kind of done. So then it was like in a kind of a complete open space. Just kept daily drawing, of course. So then I had a lot of freedom because we didn't know when it would happen again. We didn't know how long it would last. It could have been a month. It could have been a year. We didn't know.
It turned
how
out to be
bad
6
it
months.
and you have to be in business, and New York has to be open, and this so I didn't know. So I was in a great state of uncertainty, as many people were. And I was like, May, complete openness and uncertainty, but also complete freedom, because really the work was ready. So I just started tinkering, and that, in that case, I was not making a piece of software for something, and I wasn't directing any meaning on it. I was just looking at stuff online. I saw some guys that started this practice called microcoding, and I realized I could write a very simple little thing and improvise with it and play with it. So that's maybe going back to scales and little tunes in music, and just kind of noodling around with no intention, which is very similar to the way I started drawing. So that felt really natural. And I found this recursive binary tree that I was talking about in some of my classes, and I realized that has a real sense to it. I really love the way it opened, and I always have. And I thought, why not just start with something as simple as that, which is just take a line, double it, very simple recursive algorithm, and it makes a tree really simply, and then all the ways you could manipulate it. So all the scenes in this are manipulations of that. So it's a kind of an algorithmic drawing with just variations and manipulations based on the sensibility of all the stuff of color and line that I've learned in drawing. And so it came together much more naturally and much more in the way that the drawings evolved. So I was very happy with it. And then, it was very somber, and I didn't know where it was going. So it was like this tree, and I liked it. But then it got turned on its side, and I saw this lung shape that kind of came out.
Yeah.
And I started thinking, that's been on my mind. So in the way that the unconscious reveals itself through reading the drawings, it started to reveal itself through reading the variations in the software that I was tweaking. So I was turning it all different ways. It looked many, many different ways before it looked like this. And there was this long black rectangle, and that seemed very somber. And I realized, we're in this very somber, uncertain time, and it's not wrong for me. I always try to be optimistic and looking out and looking at all the ways the mind can work, but it's not wrong to relate to. And the way Complex City really related to the way I felt in the city in 2000, which was a very exuberant time. This piece relates really to that whole summer that everyone went through of staying in their place. And so it's very somber, and a lot of people died, and so the black was also appropriate. So I started to see more about my life and what was going on in my mind as it came out in the software. And that's how it evolved.
And then the drawing air, of course, it is drawing, but it's in a very ephemeral state digitally. So it ties, and drawing air, obviously taking a breath.
Taking breath, and that's the core of a lot of meditation practice. Focus on the breath.
Yes, focus on breathing.
We're all focused on breathing when COVID might keep us from breathing. So it fit.
It ties. It all ties. But you said something actually very interesting that I always kind of pondered, but I never really wanted to ask. But you said something very revealing, and you sort of just confirmed what I was thinking. Your drawing on paper is very automatic, and you don't really know it's spontaneous.
That's right.
But doing this piece of work, you have to be very deliberate and specific because it's code. If you don't, it just doesn't happen. It doesn't materialize.
Yeah.
So I see what you're saying now. That isn't a huge inherent conflict, but it sounds like the way you got around that was, and maybe this is something then you have to build into you have to create this sort of not free time, but this sort of open with no cap or deadline
It
to
helps.
figure out how to sort of then work
But I
with.
think what also helped really well was that I took a very small but effective little algorithm, and so but it was still kind of open-ended in meaning, and I just played with that compositionally. So I didn't actually have to direct the code with the meaning. I could actually just use the already moving image on the screen to compose with.
So do you think this was a breakthrough then in terms of, because I know you're very process oriented, as we talked about earlier today with one of your other visitors, that, you know, her interest is in process and art. Do you see that as a breakthrough then this summer in terms of
the way I can work with code in the future?
Okay, and you still feel like it resonates with your meditation practice that way?
Yeah, I think it's a better way to work with code for me now. Also because code is not what it was 20 years ago, and now there are teams and hundreds of people. There's no way. At that time, there was some sense that I could keep up with, like my code would be in some ways the latest research. Like A-Life was really about artificial life, and that was really at the edge of, it wasn't the cutting edge, but it was out there in terms of what people were doing with artificial life.
Got it.
But now to do that would be,
Yes.
way beyond the capacity of one programmer part-time. So how do I still engage with code? I need to get simpler. It's more like writing a little poem. And not only that, but I'm not directing the meaning of it, but I'm finding a little piece of code that has interactions that are interesting, and then using that as a vocabulary to compose with. And that's more in tune with the way I draw and the way I create these days.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. You start with just one mark, it might be spontaneous, but then that begats another mark and another mark and another mark. So what you're describing is finding some small
mark
digitally. It sounds like you've kind of cracked the code how to now take software art, which has to be structured, and bring it into the same realm.
Proceed compositionally.
Yeah,
I agree.
and to have that fluidity.
This little binary tree was a key to it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably like 10 lines of code.
Because we really hadn't talked about that. This is the first time we talked about this, so that's really is sort of another breakthrough.
Yeah, it's true.
Just like
that's why I didn't want to repeat complexity, because that's what I need to get to when I work. I need to get to that.
Something that's new and different.
Yeah, I need to get to a new understanding of who I am and where I am and what the practice is. And the reason I didn't continue to make Complex City 4 and 5 and Color Panel 8, was that I wanted to move forward.
We didn't want it to be a shtick. You wanted it to.
It's that waking up to what's new and changing.
Well, it's sort of like me when I curate a show or work with artists on a show. I want a show where there's been something. You've had some breakthrough. You've had something that's new, that's different, and that's what I always love, because that's what it's exciting, and the artist is energized and what have you, as opposed to, it's been 18 months, we should do a show, here's 8 new things or 10 new things or whatever. And I think that's what's been exciting about working with you is that you put a body of work together when you're inspired, and you've sort of accomplished something artistically or meditatively or intellectually.
You don't publish a scientific paper until you've done the research.
Yeah, and so your artwork ends up being a manifestation of a breakthrough.
This is the publication of it. It's researched in the cards, and when I'm ready, I publish, and this is the way it's published.
So this really is a super significant show on a lot of levels. I mean, aside from how profound the pandemic has been.
It's been 4 years since the solo show, too.
Yeah.
So 4 years since I made a body of work, so it was time.
Well, thanks for sharing that, because I was wondering about that. And I wondered if that's why you had sort of maybe moved away from software art for a while, but I knew you also felt like code, and as you just explained, has changed so much and so profoundly that I think you've sort of found your way back into it.
I hope so. I love it, but there's
I do too.
There's a lot of there were a lot of issues. I've been through a lot. I could give you the whole history of all that, but
it's doing the kaleidoscope now. I hope it's showing up on the camera, on the video. So we're trying to stand so that what you saw was basically 2 views of the exhibition. There are 14 works total, and what we were trying to capture in the writings and in our discussions that John and I have had over the last several months is sort of the significance of the work and how it has been a breakthrough for him. But what we have focused on is the meditative process and the drawings. And now that this is complete and it's up, and we now are seeing this connectivity with the rest of the show. It's been great to kind of talk about that with you,
Yeah.
to kind of get your early thoughts now that you've seen everything up on the wall and curated in a particular way. It's been a lot of fun, so I appreciate it.
No, it's
and,
amazing. It's great to have the discussion. That's really what showing it is about.
Yeah.
To be able to bring it out and talk about it. So thanks for that.
Oh yeah, well, and I'm sure we'll continue our little video discussions, because it's always so good to talk to you, because things come to my mind, and it's always great to hear how it ties back to other things in your practice, or how you think about, how it ties to your other work, or just even things that are going on sort of in your life. And also now with the pandemic, of course, that sort of has affected everybody's lives. So very good. It was a great talk. Thank you so
Okay.
much, and I hope people can come in and see the exhibition in person.
I hope so. Thank you.